Mike Koefman, thanks so much for joining us. Tell me a little bit about yourself and Planet Hydrogen.
Okay, well, about myself, it's quickly said. I used to be a language teacher. I worked in Zambia in Africa for 10 years. I've worked with young offenders in Manchester in the UK, language teaching, etc. I got the chance for early retirement and went straight into a science degree in order to get a real handle on the science and engineering of climate change, ocean change, etc. Because I find that if you want to persuade engineers, especially to get things done, you have to speak their language.
Can I just ask, when did you first, I guess, become aware of the issue of climate change?
Climate change, maybe 30 years ago. I was always fairly alert. Being a teacher, you had to be for this kind of thing. And of course, the hole in the ozone layer, it all started coming in together. And then maybe 25 years ago, I was in a left-wing, greeny bookshop in Manchester and came across two books next to each other, both on hydrogen. I thought, read them straight off. This is the answer. Very, very naive. I had to learn a lot more after that. I went for the degree, etc. But I could see if we're going to burn something, if you need a fuel, as we do need a fuel, and we can't burn carbon because it always produces carbon dioxide, it has to be hydrogen. There is simply nothing else, however awkward it is.
So, when did you sort of start up and kind of formalise into an organisation?
17 years ago. We had the chance of a small room in an environmental centre in Manchester, and it was touch and go, shall we take it or not, because of course we had to pay rent and everything like that. But we took it on and we founded our organisation. It's changed its name. It was the Hydrogen Energy Association of UK and Ireland, far too grandiose. Then it became the Campaign for a Hydrogen Economy, which is a little bit too campaigny. So in the end we've become Planet Hydrogen, which we hope has got a more general appeal. We did our website as well, which needs updating, by the way. Don't look too closely for the moment.
And I guess where does hydrogen fit in terms of you've got all these brilliant new technologies coming out, and the technology really does look positive, but hydrogen doesn't get talked about all that much.
No, hydrogen doesn't get talked about, partly because of the media, partly because there's a universal mindset, partly because there's a lot of antipathy towards hydrogen, but there are some positives as well. But the positives tend to be very top-down at the moment. All the big companies concerned with energy are into hydrogen. Total, for example, in France, General Electric in the United States, ABB, big Swedish-Swiss combined, they all know about hydrogen, they're all researching it, but a little bit on the quiet, because they know that there's not a universal market for it yet.
We're kind of surpassing hydrogen in cars though, aren't we? We're kind of moving on to the electric car quite quickly. So where does hydrogen fit in? Where do we need it?
At the moment there's a sort of unreal dispute between supporters of electric vehicles and supporters of hydrogen vehicles. In fact, a hydrogen vehicle will always need support by a battery, and battery vehicles are also going to need hydrogen, not in the car, but as storage during energy generation further upwards in the grid. Hydrogen comes in one place or the other.
Tell me a bit more about that sort of higher up the grid, sort of upstream hydrogen.
Yes. For example, in Hamburg in Germany, there is a pair of very large wind turbines, 5 megawatts each, which produce electricity which is fed into an electrolyzer, which is a big machine filled with water, into which electricity is poured. That electricity splits the water into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is vented into the atmosphere, which is a good thing. The hydrogen is retained and then pushed into the natural gas pipework of Hamburg up to a certain percentage. Now, if that could be expanded, that meant that pipework in the end could be pure hydrogen, and then that would mean that would furnish electricity back again to the grid when there was no wind turning at any one time.
Why do you feel the need to do what you do, which is kind of advocate for this technology? Why not just sort of find its way because it makes sense?
Could you say that again?
So I just wonder, won't this technology, if it makes sense and it sounds really reasonable, it sounds like it's being deployed, why do you feel the need to do what you do, which is sort of advocate for it and push it further?
I suppose it's an awareness of history, that what we call history, human progress, and I believe in progress actually, it may sound a bit naive these days. We have to think of the future, we have to think on decadal scales, centennial scales, millennial scales. If we look into the far future, what are people going to say about us if we've overloaded the atmosphere in carbon dioxide and done nothing about it? Because the big problem, and is mistakenly stated as the emissions problem. Emissions are only the lever, the step-by-step, annual step-by-step, which are increasing the concentration. It's the concentrations that do the damage. And it's the concentrations that have to come down. The concentrations, as you will probably know already, are around about 400 parts per million. They're over that now. They should be 280, which is what they were pre-industrially. So we have to do two things. We have to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and there's an organization present today at BONN, which is looking into that, based in California, where else? But at the same time, we have to have a fuel to replace all the carbon fuels, coal, oil and gas. We can't manage without fuel, we know that.
Can hydrogen power aircraft?
Sorry?
Can it power aircraft?
Yes, it's done so already, both in the United States 50 years ago and in the ex-Soviet Union 25 years ago, when it switched swapping from the USSR over to Russia. Large twin jets were sent into the air. One of the two turbines was powered by kerosene as normal, the other by liquid hydrogen. There was no problem. It worked. But to make it work on a commercial scale, this is where the engineers and big finance comes in, of course. You can't make it work experimentally. It has to be universalized. And that's going to be a big problem, because there are around about 30,000 large aircraft whizzing around the world, plus many, many more smaller ones. To switch them all over to hydrogen is going to take some time. Investment decisions have to be made. All sorts of bits of research have to be done. But in the end, it can work. It's a good question, by the way, because that's the most tricky part to make hydrogen work. It is in aviation.
How do you mine the hydrogen, and do you get it out of water, or?
It has to be water, because when you take hydrogen out of water and you burn that hydrogen on being burnt becomes water again. What happens to that water as water vapor? It enters the rain cycle and therefore does no harm whatsoever. It doesn't touch the carbon cycle. Therefore that means it's completely safe in itself. But that still leaves the task of bringing extra carbon dioxide down out of the atmosphere. That is a technical job which is very, very difficult to solve. We don't know exactly how to do that yet. It needs heavy research and it's not getting enough.
Thank you very much for your time.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.